Cool.
Okay. So everything.
Hello, everyone. How's it going this afternoon, or end of morning going into afternoon? Everybody's 2018 off to a good start? All right. So I'm Stuart DeCue. I'm the Executive Director of the Yale Center for Business and the Environment, and thrilled to launch a new type of event between the School of Management and the School of Forestry and Environmental Studies. As many of you know, we get together on a monthly basis, at least as a community, to talk through kind of the different projects, components. We have outside speakers. We've got a lot of different approaches to getting folks engaged and seeing what's happening in and around the community. One component that we looked at this year and we said we really want to focus on is highlighting and demonstrating where all the amazing faculty, PhD, and other research is on campus. And so we're thrilled today to have the first of these CBEYond research spotlights, where we get to feature Tamar Makoff, who's a PhD candidate at the School of Forestry and Environmental Studies, and Jason Dana, who's a professor at the School of Management. And the thing that I think you'll discover over time is there are a lot of interesting connections and overlaps and relationships between research of different disciplines in and around Yale. And one of the things that we want to do is show where those are, show where the connections are, and where some of the potential differences is, and where you all can build off of that research or connect to it. It also addresses another need for us, which we've identified from talking to faculty members, from being in and around the community, is graduate students on campus. Like, how many people here are master's students at Yale? All right. How many of you would say you are very familiar with 2 to 3 faculty members' research here at Yale? Great. So that is one of the other things that we want to address, is the connection between people who are amazing teachers and professors here to the research that is driving a lot of their work, because there's lots of interesting stuff happening that when you are looking at a certain slice of the university and your experience, you're not seeing. And so we hope that this will also address that. So in that light, if you all have ideas or topics that you'd like to connect on, where you think there is a natural fit between faculty across Yale, let us know, and we'd love to feature those. So format for today is Tamar is going to kick us off. She's going to give a around 12-minute presentation on her research, kind of a quick summary. Then Jason's going to go. Then we're going to have a very kind of brief facilitated dialogue between the two of them that I'll help kick off, and then open it up to you all. So we kind of want to start getting their research out on the table. We'll hold questions until after that, and then allow everybody in the audience to jump in. Sound good? All right. And welcome to everybody online. Hello, alumni, friends, all others. Wish you were here, and we're glad we can make this available to you. All right. And with that, Tamar, please kick us off.
Thanks.
Welcome.
Thank you. Woohoo! So hi, everyone. As you mentioned, my name's Tamar, and I'm a PhD candidate at the Center of Industrial Ecology at the School of Forestry and Environmental Studies. And today I'm going to share some work that I've done in collaboration with George Newman, sitting right there, on consumer perceptions of environmental win-wins. So when I talk about win-wins, I'm talking about sustainability initiatives that also generate economic benefits for companies. So just a step back, when we think about business and the environment, we're used to seeing them as two opposing forces in a zero-sum game, right? We can either have one or the other, but not both. But as I'm sure most of you in this room know, the idea that business performance and environmental outcomes can actually be aligned has struck root in recent years with many of the world's largest organizations. As this book, Green to Gold, written by one of Yale's own Dan Esty, and many others like it suggests, companies can actually gain a competitive advantage by internalizing environmental considerations into their business strategies. So just to be more specific about what I mean when I refer to win-win environmental strategies, I'm talking about sustainability initiatives that are also economically beneficial for companies. So why should we even care about these type of win-win initiatives? Well, first, they've been adopted by a wide range of companies across the business spectrum. We can think about Walmart's green supply chain, we can think about McDonald's, we can talk about Apple's, and many others. And it's also important to understand that aligning environmental and business goals is essential for fostering sustainable development. After all, the business of business is business, right? They're supposed to make profits. Now, it's commonly assumed that such win-win initiatives would reflect positively on companies, right? I mean, we're familiar with example of greenwashing, where companies can use some incremental environmental benefit to kind of paint themselves green in an attempt to be more appealing to consumers. But today I'm going to talk to you and show you the 3 studies that suggest that these type of win-wins can actually be judged very negatively by consumers. So in our first study, George and I wanted to use a real-life example. We often look at the world and, get inspiration from it. And in our first study, participants were asked to evaluate 2 different scenarios. In one scenario, we gave them a short newspaper article out of the New York Times describing Patagonia's pro-environmental Don't Buy This Jacket campaign. Now, we all know that Patagonia is a very strong pro-environmental actor, and this campaign is something that the company had launched as a plea to reduce consumption during Black Friday in 2011. So participants read a little bit about this campaign, and they were also told that this campaign proved to be very successful for Patagonia, and its profits went up by 130% as a result. So while half of the participants read about this campaign, the other half, our control, read about a very similar kind of text, only this time it featured a company's more conventional advertisement campaign, their Try On Adventure campaign. So again, people read about it and learned that the company's profits went up by 130% as a result. In addition to these 2 conditions, we also had 2 conditions where participants read very similar news articles, only this time, they read that the companies had gained brand recognition from these 2 campaigns. So instead of profits, it was brand recognition. And as our results show, people evaluate the company significantly more negatively when the Try On Adventure campaign resulted in profits than when their conventional ad campaign resulted in profits. Now, while this was true for the profit condition, this wasn't true when the benefit that the company got was brand reputation. So basically, why should consumers show such a negative reaction, such a backlash to the notion of an environmental win-win, right? To the idea that a company is profiting from a pro-environmental message. After all, the incentives are aligned, right? The company is profiting, there is a sustainability message out there, and we all want that type of thing to happen. Well, if we look into psychology, we know that people make a very clear distinction between social constructs. And under each of these social constructs, people abide to different norms and different rules. So for example, under a communal sharing social construct, people are expected to basically give what they can to the common pool and take what they need. And no one's really keeping track of what each individual is taking or giving in return. These are the type of relationships that we have with our family members, very, very close friends. Now, in a market exchange social construct, in contrast, a lot of effort is actually placed on making sure that exchanges are equitable and that people get equitable outcome for what they're paying for. Now, one thing that comes out of these 2 very divergent social constructs is that the introduction of money into a relationship that's thought of as communal can be seen as tainting or tabooed. I'll give you an example. So a week ago, my husband and I went into Manhattan to spend the night with friends. And at about 5 p.m. on a Saturday night, we get a text from our dog walker, "Sorry, I won't be able to make it tonight. You have to find another solution." We're like, okay, what are we going to do? Obviously, we're not going to drive back from the city into Woodbridge to walk the dog. Long story short, I end up calling one of my office mates, asking him, could you do me this huge favor? Go walk my dog in the freezing cold. And I was preparing this presentation that weekend, so I thought, this is a really neat idea. I can do an experiment with an N of 1 and see how we react if I ask him, if I try to pay him for walking my dog. So indeed, Monday morning, I come into the office. I ask him, so how was it? Was it okay? And I encourage him to talk about it. He tells me, oh, you don't know, it was like 30 minutes drive over to your house and 30 minutes back. And then I had the pleasure of walking your dog in like 0 Fahrenheit. I'm like, great, thank you so much. Here's $10. I hope it's okay. This is what we usually pay our dog walker. Now, needless to say that the shock on his face was priceless. I should have had someone taking a photo. But this is a really good example for how by me trying to pay him, I was basically violating the very foundations of the communal relationship that we have, right? I was offering him money for a favor. This was something that he really didn't expect, and it really meant that I was suggesting that he wasn't there for intrinsic reasons, right? That he had ulterior motives. So this is what we think is actually happening in the Patagonia example, where the introduction of profit taints the value of this pro-social campaign, while a reputational benefit isn't seen as tainting in the same way, because it doesn't violate the same communal norms. So in our next study, in study 2, we sought to test this hypothesis that the negative backlash to this environmental win-win results from this blurring between the lines and the introduction of money into a communal relationship. So to this end, we first primed participants into the kind of social construct mindset that we wanted them to be in by asking them to complete a very short writing exercise. So participants that we wanted to prime into a communal mindset were asked to write about a time in their life where they experienced a sense of community, where people pulled resources together without anyone keeping track of how much each individual gave or received. In the market context, participants were asked to write about the time in their life where they participated in an efficient market exchange, where people exchanged resources such as money, contributing and receiving in proportion to what they sold or bought. Now, once they had completed this short writing exercise, participants were asked to evaluate one of 2 scenarios. In the first scenario, we told them that their trash collector was thinking of implementing a pay-as-you-throw charging mechanism, right? They were charging by the pounds for waste collection in order to help the environment. In a second condition, we told the other half of participants that their trash collector was thinking of implementing a pay-as-you-throw pricing mechanism to help the environment and increase its profits. So a very subtle difference between the text in these 2 cases. So just a wrap up of what the design was, we had participants first complete one of 2 priming exercises, either communal or market, then read one of 2 descriptions of the initiative. It was either a control, which was the environmental only initiative, versus the win-win. And then we asked them, please tell us how moral the company is. And in line with our hypothesis, while participants saw no difference in how moral the company was when they were primed with the market priming first, when they were in the market exchange mindset, they evaluated the company significantly less positively when they were in a communally oriented mindset, right? And we can see that this negative reaction is really specific to the combination of a communal mindset and profits. So far we've seen that these type of win-wins are evaluated negatively when they yield profits, but we don't see the same type of negative reaction when it's a reputational benefit. And we also saw from study 2 that priming participants specifically to be in a market versus communal mindset can attenuate this effect. Now, this led us to believe that just reading about an environmental initiative naturally cues a communal mindset in people, right? That people think of being pro-environmental as something that's very much alike to being pro-social. Now, this suggests that the order of information in which people are exposed to, so the order, sorry, my slide cut, so I'm off balance here. This suggests that the order in which we're exposed to information can basically cue us into a particular mindset, and that reading about environmental information first would make us think about communal relationships, while reading about market information first might lead to different evaluations because we'll be in a market-oriented mindset. So in study 3, we did something even more advanced, and we gave participants to read the exact same information, again, about our very green, pro-environmental Patagonia. So participants read 2 pages. On one page, it said that Patagonia is very profitable, the company has very high prices, an exclusive image, and it's known as Patagucci or Patagonia. And on a different page, participants read that Patagonia was also a big contributor to the environment and that it donates millions of dollars to environmental cause, so on and so forth. It's basically a Miss Goody Two-Shoes of environmental behavior. Now, in both conditions, participants read the exact same information. The only difference was that in one case, participants read the economic information first, and then on the second page, they read how pro-environmental Patagonia was, while in the other condition, participants first read that Patagonia was really pro-environmental, and only then how profitable it was. And indeed, we found that this subtle difference in the order in which the information was presented resulted in very different evaluations of the company. In a nutshell, people thought of the company far more negatively when they read the environmental information first than when they read the market information first. So in conclusion, even if the benefits in the real world are exactly the same, people can have very different perceptions of companies. Now, this is not limited to greenwashing only, right? What I shared with you today was examples of real environmental strategies that could have yielded real environmental benefits. And it's very important to understand that uninformed messaging of win-win might actually do more harm than good, and that environmental win-wins are judged under a communally oriented norms where profits elicit this negative backlash. Thank you.
Oops. So hold your questions, write them down if you have them, right? We're going to hear from Jason, and then we'll come together and have a chat about both. Thanks, Tamar.
Sure. I think you need to jump a few slides, otherwise people see my junk slides.
All right.
All my spares.
Ah,
there you go.
that's me.
Thanks.
So to get you thinking about this research, imagine that you were the CEO of, let's say, a casual dining chain that was considering expanding your operations into a new area, a new market, and one of your executives approaches you with the business plan for this expansion. And this business plan involves, relative to how you've been doing things, lowering your service quality, having fewer safety standards, worse environmental standards, deceptive marketing practices. Okay, that's the plan that's been put before you. Do you, as the CEO, expect that this plan will lead to increased and sustained profitability? I see a few heads like this. Okay, well then you may be surprised, or maybe you're not surprised, that the lay public, and that is Americans who answer our surveys for pay, typically report that they do expect that these practices will increase profit. On average, they expect increase and sustained profitability. We refer to that as anti-profit beliefs, a nexus of beliefs that holds that profitable actions must be coming at someone else's expense. So the win-win that Tamar talked about, more generally, people don't believe in the win-win in the marketplace. They think that profit is a zero-sum game, and for you to be able to profit, it must be coming at someone else's expense. Yeah. This chart says a lot, and we've done this exercise many times with lots of different names, but here we have 40 different Fortune 500 firms that, from a particular year, that we thought people would recognize the names. And we have people rate how profitable they perceive the firm to be, and that's represented on the x-axis, and how much value they perceive this firm to be providing to society. So is it providing a lot of value, or on the other end of the scale, would society be better off without them? And that's on the y-axis. And each of these dots is the average rating for each firm on these two measures. And what you see is a very clear and strong negative correlation, right? So Americans, and probably living in one of the most market-oriented societies in the world, have a pretty negative perception of the market. They think that, well, to answer Tamar's question from her titular slide, right, that you can't do well by doing good. You do well by doing bad. Yeah? This relationship holds if we replace perceived profit with actual profits, with revenues, the logs thereof. It is not a political thing, so you can break our sample into self-reported liberals, conservatives. It might change the slope a little bit, but it doesn't get rid of the overall qualitative conclusion that people have anti-profit beliefs. The one relationship that would look different here, we could replace perceived social value with KLD ratings. And this is an independently run multi-dimensional rating of a firm's social responsibility on several dimensions. Yeah. And KLD ratings in this sample of firms actually relate positive to profitability. Right? So American consumers, at least as far as that goes, have the direction absolutely opposite of what a social responsibility rating holds. So where does this come from? Like why would people hold anti-profit beliefs? I think the psychology behind that is really rich. In our studies, we focused on one particular mechanism, which is more cognitive. Right? So, look, there are, in any market that's not perfectly functioning, good and bad reasons for profits. And bad profits come from either in some way interfering with the function of free exchange or by putting costs on other people in the course of my production, right, and negative externalities. And these types of profits that are made in what I'm calling the bad way, simply entail taking a bigger slice of the pie for oneself. So they're the zero-sum game aspect of the profits. Yeah. Good reasons for profit, though, if there's just a little bit of competition in a market, right, sometimes profiting will have to entail coming up with a better product, right? Coming up with a new product that people want. Figuring out how to deliver that product to the place where people want it the most. Figuring out how to produce it more efficiently and cheaply than your competitors, right? This would be the good reasons for profit, and this entails growing the pie, right? When you come up with new and better products and produce them more efficiently, which ultimately will be more environmentally friendly, you're growing the pie. Yep. Well, if you think about it, any one-shot exchange that someone engages in, any time a consumer buys something, that exchange literally is just zero-sum, right? More profit to the producer means less surplus to the consumer. That is true, right? And so unless you perversely side with the big guy, the more profitable the firm, the worse the situation. If a firm is too profitable, that's a bad thing. Right? All of the pie enlarging aspects of a transaction, right? How did this particular product come to be offered to me at this time, in this place, at this price, right? Those are all dynamic factors that emerged from companies competing with each other with the allure, with the incentive of profit. That is literally invisible to the consumer. You don't see that. You never see that. Right? You can intellectualize about it, you can learn about it, but you never tangibly experience it. So it stands to reason, right, that in the layperson's experience, there isn't a win-win. Right? Profit is a zero-sum proposition. We've tried lots of things to attenuate anti-profit beliefs. We remind people about long-term views of profit versus short-term. You know, in our hypothetical scenarios, we stress or remind people, okay, this is a more competitive market. This is a less competitive market. Yeah? What about reputational effects, right? These things tend not to work very well. The one thing we've done that sort of attenuates profit is to get people to explicitly think through prompting and prodding about these long-term incentive effects of profit. So to give you an example, we've done these scenarios in which a firm comes up with a new product. Maybe it's a vaccine, Maybe it's a new kind of battery that stores better than old batteries, and it's almost disruptive. It's just way better than what competitors are doing. So that in the short run, the firm could profit immensely, right? It could do things either way better or way cheaper than other people are doing them. So in the near term, until people catch up with them, they're going to make a lot of profit. And then we ask people about, in this hypothetical world, about either repealing a law or introducing a new law that takes the lid off of profits in that industry. So profits were capped in that industry, and now they're unfettered. And we ask people to think about how consumers will be affected by that, right? So one control is just to ask, how do you think consumers will benefit or not benefit from firms being able to profit? And of course, in this scenario, right, we've got a well-defined reason. It's like the good reasons for profit, and profits are limited in term. Then we asked some questions prompting them to think about what the immediate term effects would be of not having this profit cap, right? So will firms like increase their prices? Are they going to reduce their quality? What will firms do in the immediate term if they can just profit unfettered? A third condition, we also add in questions that induce thinking about the long term. In other words, how will firms react to the incentives or lack thereof when you lift profits or don't lift profits, right? Are they going to keep investing in risky research and development? Right? Are they going to ramp up production? Are they going to prepare to, or are they not, right? So getting people to think about the long-term incentives that this profit, that being able to profit, if even in the short term, introduces. And here's our results. So, and remember, this is on a scale that ran from -2 is much worse off, +2 much better off. You can see that in the control, our respondents expect that this law that allows firms to profit as much as they can from this invention to be bad for consumers. And you see that adding in the immediate prompt, and we find this across a lot of studies, this is common, adding in the immediate prompt, which is like adding, cueing them to think about zero-sum aspects of profit, doesn't change the responses at all, right? It's as if that's already what they were thinking about. And we find this again and again across a variety of studies that cueing people to think about zero-sum is like cueing them not to think about anything. It's just like a control, right? But when we carefully ask people lots of questions about the long-term incentives that profit are going to introduce, and then ask them how the law is going to affect, now we have sort of attenuated anti-profit beliefs. Now, on average, people are unsure. It's a wash. We've never been able, though, to get our subjects to recognize that profit might actually be good, might actually be win-win. So we've never gotten a significant, this is good for consumers of profit. Right? But we have we were going to limit to 12 minutes, so I guess we can move on to the question part. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Jason. So just starting out, you two have heard each other present before. You're familiar with each other's work. When you hear this, the studies again, and you're prompted to think about it. What are the connections and implications between the studies that you all put together, the types of research that you're doing, and if you could, where would it connect, or what are the types of things that if you all could gin up a study today, how would you do something together that bridges what you've both done?
So you're starting us off with a softball?
Yeah, softball, exactly.
I don't know if you...
Well, I think that they are very much connected and aligned. Jason's talking about, the grand scheme of things, and the example that I shared today was something very macro. But I think it speaks to the same idea that profits is something that relates to a very fundamental. It has its own place, and doing good is incompatible with it, because doing good is communal. So to me, I just wrote 3 ideas off of Jason's presentation right now that I could study, and I'm sure we'd get similar results. So this is how I see it. They're very much connected.
Yeah, it's funny. We were talking beforehand, and Tamar thought that her presentation was much more specific because on the surface it's just about green stuff, and that mine was more broad. Although I think in terms of the psychology behind it, the things I'm talking about are very specific, right? The failure to understand a specific mechanism, and yours are very broad. I mean, beyond even the tangible aspects of zero-sum versus pi enhancement, whatever, there are just more deep-seated, almost moralistic opposition to sort of tainting some sort of good act with profit or benefit to the self that your work is touching on, which I think is very interesting. And well.
So what are the 3 ideas?
No, I mean, just not going to share, it's a secret. But just in a nutshell, to me, at the School of Forestry, we and I've been TAing corporate environmental management and strategy that Marianne teaches, and we always talk about the win-wins and how good they are, and it's a real win-win, and this is the path to sustainable development. So every time I present this, afterwards, I'm like, shucks. Well, if even we can't acknowledge that these are really good things and judge them by their actual value to society and not through this distorted lens of, but they should be better, they could be better. I don't know, I just get a bit disheartened, is that how you would say? I think that's an English word, so yeah.
You both mentioned in your presentations ways to attenuate this effect. And recently, the largest investor in the world, the CEO of that, BlackRock, came out with a letter saying that we want companies to think about their purpose, think long term, and be able to provide a benefit to society. Can you talk about, from your research, or what would you suggest, will this letter have an impact, or what are the ways that this changes at a macro level? Like, how does this public perception actually shift in a way where you can see a win-win?
I wouldn't mind jumping on this one first because I've been getting emailed that one like crazy.
Yeah.
A lot of people thought of me when they saw it. I have a very mixed reaction to this. On the one hand, it looks like the market functioning in a way that we'd want it to, right? So, look, if people don't like the way that firms are behaving, don't like the way that they're making profit, or want them to have a broader vision than just profit and do more for society, then consumers will punish them, and now investors will punish them, right? So this is just the forces of demand, right? Changing how firms operate, right? And self-correcting, so to speak. On the other hand, I think that this push to get firms to do more than merely profit reflects the sort of anti-profit beliefs that I was just presenting about. Firms aren't merely profiting. When firms are profiting, they're doing a lot for the world. They're providing something of value. And cementing in people's minds that they need to have more responsibility to the world than merely profit is sort of cementing this old bias in people's heads that profit itself is wicked, and that it's taken, and that firms owe or should give back in return for it. And I see firms as being in a kind of social dilemma with respect to this. I think individually it's smart and rational to say we give back, right? We go above and beyond merely profiting, right? Because the reputational effects are generally good. But if all firms do this, I think that you're eroding away at the forces that allow you to do good in a sustainable way. That is the way we do it, at least here, which is through a market-based economy. Right?
I don't know, to me maybe it's just a signal that the norms are changing and for the better, and that's a very good thing. On the other hand, maybe we shouldn't have those expectations that consumers are going to applaud each and every sustainable initiative that a company takes on. They might have different expectations, so on and so forth, but it's still, it's still a very positive move in the right direction, in my opinion. And, I'm biased, of course, about this, coming from the School of Forestry, but I see it as imperative for companies.
Great. Before I open up to the audience, one last question on, when you talk about the attenuation issues, how would you recommend that students that are, currently here going to a job next year operationalize your research? What when they're working in roles, whether they're in firms or they're selling products or doing different things, like what are the implications of this for people going out and working? Like, how do you take this and apply it to your work?
Well, I guess for me, if you're going on a sustainability internship and your job is to deal with corporate social responsibility, just be mindful that there are ways in which this can backlash. There are ways in which you can build this into a positive message that creates value for the company, but you need to be aware of how you're crafting it. And our studies showed that it's actually pretty malleable and that you can, if you're informed, you can create a positive message around your corporate social responsibility initiatives or sustainability initiatives in general. But you have to be aware of what you're doing.
Yeah, management takeaways are tough because this is a very tough, the bias I'm studying is very tough to disabuse people of. I agree that backlash effects is probably a big one. And you know, there's research in behavioral marketing showing that, I don't know, firms take on sort of personalities in the consumer's mind so that nonprofits are viewed as very warm, but profitable, successful firms are viewed as competent. Right? But I guess the double-edged sword behind being too successful, too competent, is that, you know, you're seen as having taken too much and needing to give a lot back. You know, at the risk of sounding immodest, I think like a lot of what we've talked about, though, could be personally relevant for people who are making their decisions where to work. I see a lot of talented people who are concerned, well, that have the concerns that Tamar was just voicing, let's say, but who feel that the best way to pursue them then is to work in nonprofit or something like this. So, you know, we talked over lunch a few weeks ago about this old, can you do more good within the system, right? Which sounds like a rationalization for selling out. But there's a certain truth to it, you know, that if you worked for McDonald's and you got them to change the dye on the wrapper just a little bit, right, you probably make a bigger impact on the world than you can doing almost anything else, right? And what kind of conflicts does this pose for people, right? Trying to do good within the system while doing well. I don't know, but this is
cool. Annie?
Jason?
Yeah, it usually doesn't. If I were to write a popular article, let's say for the New York Times, probably more people will read that than all of my academic papers combined ever. And you know, I don't know. I see myself. This is going to sound terrible. I see myself as a basic researcher. I'm not an engineer. I don't know. You know, I'm not in the business of applying it, except when I'm in the classroom. This is a different. But you know, well, how does it get disseminated? A lot of these things get picked up by, you know, like we have a spotlight little piece in HBR where we talk about whether American consumers can recognize win-win possibilities. So this is one way that, you know, there are these kind of management magazines that disseminate information. Sometimes we work it into our classroom teaching. I don't.
Yeah, so I'm like on the job market and thinking whether I should be in a school of environment or in a management school. And I keep thinking I would just have, you know, if I could get some of my green goggles way of looking at the world into some of the MBAs that are later going to run the world, that's probably going to be my biggest impact on the world. So for this particular study, you know, it's very hard to get the message out there. I think that other work that I do that's more applied in industrial ecology and so on, their companies might see the connection more easily. I think that's easier work to communicate and disseminate into industry.
Marion?
I'm going to stand up so I can see. You know, I learned long ago that companies can do more than one thing at once, more than one position at a time. So, especially in the environment, someone really might do something very green, but they might not too dirty chemicals to be exempted and so forth. And I think it suggests to me that the public that isn't anti-profit, so to speak, is easily deceived. And what I want to say is that maybe the whole framework of good, bad, and the fact that so many things can happen simultaneously means that you're just a partial argument. So I'd like you to react to the partial argument part and see how the partial and the whole fit together from your perspectives.
The partial argument being just that companies do both good and bad things.
Easier to focus on bad, I think.
Okay. Yeah, sure, Kay.
I don't know if you can go back to your scattergram, but sort of struck by
Could, yeah, yeah.
sort of struck by the fact that you don't have on there companies like Google or
Have done lots of tech companies, yeah.
or Tesla.
Uh-huh. Yeah, this one's a few years old. We've done lots of things with tech companies. Do you have a particular hypothesis about them?
I mean, as you guys are presenting it, it's very interesting. I think you're definitely onto something, at least partially, with the way people think that money and good. But take Amazon. They're a company that some people would say, well, they're doing some bad stuff, but look at their stock price and look at their capture of the market. So, I mean, I'm wondering if it's more nuanced than you're suggesting for the forward-looking sectors like tech, auto, even utilities.
In the fact that they're not,
I'm sorry, that looks like a whole bunch of companies.
yeah. This one was run several years back.
You've got growth in PE and VC and tech. And so would it look different for different sectors?
For sure. What people tend to do, right? So eBay is one. With these, with these Amazon, Google, even Tesla to some degree, these are very recognizable names, and these are products that they may use every day, especially if you're doing internet surveys and these are internet-based. So people tend to rate these and really overrate these companies' profitability. But I tend to find that they fall above the regression line. So you would see them out here a little bit. So these companies have a better reputation than their perceived profitability would usually imply. And I think it's just, I think when you look at a lot of firms that you find above the regression line, so to speak, these are things that lay people use day in and day out. Tools, foods, things like this. So either consumer durables or technologies that they use every day. And they tend to rate these as a little bit more useful because, of course, it's easier tangibly to see why they're useful. Whereas investment firms, I think a lot of lay people can't even imagine what it is that they're doing. They tell me they're just moving money around. So it's hard for them to see what value these types of firms create. It's less tangible.
Tamar, do you have any thoughts on this as well? Because there's no firm that I think in popular mind would be more affiliated with environmental attributes or than Patagonia, and a lot of your research focuses on that company in particular. So what is that?
Yeah, that's the reason we chose Patagonia, because it's such a, it really walks the talk, right? You can't find a better example for a company whose motivations are actually really green and they're privately held, so they don't need to be accountable and so on. But we still find that even with Patagonia, it's as if people expect Patagonia to just be pro-environmental and they like the company, but then profitability comes in there and they don't like it. So to me, it's all partial and it's all very specific, and it was very specific scenarios that people read about and evaluated. But still, if we can find this with, the poster child of being a good environmental actor, Patagonia, we'll probably find it in anything Tesla or Google or any other company that people think very highly of. I think to me, it's just a fundamental discrepancy between profitability and doing good. This is the way we think.
Shannon, then over to you. Go.
So, and I think that this might be what Marion is getting at, but I think partially people are responding to a profit system that seems rigged. And so, yes, maybe you have all these negative externalities and a firm's only, rational choice is to take advantage, like they're not going to pay a carbon tax and the carbon tax doesn't exist. And so people's ideas about like this anti-profit idea is more about a system that seems unfair rather than just an individual company. And so even if an individual company is doing well, it's like, well, you're still benefiting from a system that tilts the scales.
Fair enough point. I mean, I think there's a lot of things that go into it. My intuition is that people who think the system is rigged are more likely anti-business and more likely politically left. We don't see that politically right people are terribly appreciative of the incentive value of profit either, right? They may be a little bit more pro-business in some of their sentiments, but they don't necessarily see how profit is win-win and actually benefits consumers. The other thing I would just say is, I mean, sure, to some extent, sure, the system is far from perfect, right? There's not a perfectly efficient market or something where the line should be like, positive 1.0. At the same time, we're at empirical reality that you actually made money and that the system rewarded firms that were harming consumers, that were doing more harm than good. We would be living in a grindingly poor society, not a dynamic super economy, right? So there's a limit to how empirically true that could be, although I don't think that when consumers espouse these beliefs that they necessarily have to hold self-consistently, right? Like consumers will say things about a lot of about business and the economy that they'll hold even self-contradictory attitudes. They certainly like to express certain things, but does that? I don't know if I'm.
To piggyback on Jason's point, also in our study, I didn't highlight this a lot, but we actually found that company was evaluated worse when it was profitable and pro-environmental than it just had a business as usual approach. So this is kind of what we find. So it is a negative reaction to the combination between doing good and profiting from it in our study. So this is not the system is rigged, because the system would be rigged in a business as usual. It's that it's something else.
Good. Harrison then. Yeah.
Harris, I'm a first-year Forestry student.
Hey.
I understand the logic here about how consumers kind of using false logic or false reasoning to correlate profits and societal value, but I struggle to really see how our conclusions end up being really wrong or harmful in any ways. I mean, to me, banking sector, credit card, fast food, these aren't really environmental stewards. They're more large reactive companies. So I'm wondering, when you put the data up against some of the sustainability scores and benchmarkings, are there any companies or industries or sectors that are really actually leading the way and are negatively impacted by some of the assumptions that consumers are making and are kind of harmfully or treated unfairly?
Well, first of all, I should say, there are people that I don't know how much I love these ratings, but there are people that attempt to make social responsibility ratings, like the KLD ratings, which I mentioned in brief during the presentation. For these firms, if you were to put KLD on the Y, the line would be going upward, just a little bit, like 0.2 slope or something like that. So it isn't in fact the case, even for this selected set of firms, that by some objective measure, the more profitable firms are somehow doing more harm to society. This research is not particularly about being an environmental steward, so I can't really say as to whether banks are or aren't environmental stewards. I think you raise a very nice point, though, which is in someone's day-to-day reality, like their function, their adaptiveness, is it even important that they reach right conclusions about these things? And I don't think that consequentially it is for most of us, right? So there's a reason that beliefs could persist, whether they're right or they're wrong, because people don't have a lot of individually stake in being correct about these things. I do think that societally we have stake in being correct about economic policies, right? So when people vote, right, even though individually you don't have a lot of pressure to be right or wrong about these things, as a society, we can systematically choose bad economic policies if we have strange beliefs about the workings of economics. Is that, I don't, yeah.
Tamara, any reactions or thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, if people are not on board with companies doing good and being profitable at the same time, then we have a problem moving forwards towards sustainable development. Because businesses, you know, they have a large impact on the natural environment, social conditions, politics, whatever you want, right? And if we don't value the good stuff properly and appreciate it, then, you know, where are we going with this?
Yeah, go ahead. Can you just say your name and where you're from? Yeah.
Do you know of any studies that have looked at similar questions in non-weird sample sizes? Western, educated, industrialized, rich, democratic, like in Japan or in developing countries?
I think that the study you mentioned that was recent was also European. I'm not familiar with studies that have examined these type of things in Asia.
Because I imagine in Japan, where people really place a lot of value, just for example, in becoming part of a corporation as part of your identity, this might just be the opposite line, which suggests it's just an American thing.
Yeah, it's hard to, this particular kind of scatter plot where you have particular firms is not as easy to do all across the world because the firm names may not be familiar in every specific market. Some of our hypothetical studies, which would just be like about a firm that's considering doing this kind of business practice or that kind of business practice, operates in this generic market or that generic market. We do take those across, we do open those up to the world in terms of survey responses. And I'm not aware of any, I'm not aware of some particular culture that's pro-profit beliefs, but we haven't done serious cross-cultural studies where you maybe even work in different languages, et cetera, so that I couldn't answer. I was kind of impressed because I would have thought of the US as being fairly pro-market society, at least market-friendly. But it's a great point, and I can't really.
Yeah, I think we have time for one more question.
Sure.
I was wondering if your communal sharing and market exchange dynamics is a simplification of the public currently, because there's an increasingly discerning subset of the population that is very wary of greenwashing. I was wondering how your advertising could be effective for companies who are generally doing good CSR.
So in these particular examples, we were only using genuine sustainability initiatives. So we try to really stay away from greenwashing. And to your question, your concern is that people might have thought that the companies were greenwashing and that that's the negative thing. So I can tell you that specifically we tested for that. For example, in the pro-environmental campaign versus the conventional one, we ran a pre-test and we asked people, how beneficial to the environment do you think this campaign is on a scale of 1 to 9? And we saw that the don't buy this jacket, people viewed it as much more environmentally beneficial. We asked them just that. And they said that it's kind of a general call for reducing consumption and repair and so on and so forth. So while people in general might view these things as greenwashing and inauthentic and even manipulative, in the case of our particular study and the particular stimuli that we used, we tested that that's not the case. I can't speak to like a general thing of whether or not people see it like that.
Cool, great. Just any final thoughts from either of you before we close for the day? Reactions, comments for the crowd?
So I've been giving this talk recently. I gave it in Israel. And I was surprised to find very similar reactions. Or maybe I wasn't surprised, but I got very similar reactions that people have a hard time believing that, you know, a win-win would be seen negatively, because I think it contradicts things that we want to believe, especially people who are in the environmental kind of domain or might be a little bit activists in their hearts. So, yeah, I think it's important.
I mean, I wonder if it was a mistake of me to lean as heavily on this particular graph, which is about particular companies and and a particular reality, because then I think a lot of the questions were about, well, are the consumers wrong? And I'm not really interested in debating too much about how positively or negatively these things are related, let's say in the U.S., or about which political approach is best. What I think concerns me more is in our hypothetical scenarios, right? So just that people don't like to express that they even believe it is possible to have a win-win. And that's more the point, right? The people don't see the possibility of these things is more concerning, or don't like to say that they see the possibility. Yeah.
Great. Well, can everyone join me in thanking Jason and Tamar for taking time to present today? And as I mentioned, we're looking to do one of these a month, featuring 2 faculty or researchers from the School of Management and the School of Forestry. So look out for one at the end of February, and then end of March, end of April.
How are you? Good to see you.